Hello and welcome, everybody. This is our third Platform Foundation Academy. Today we'll be talking about ATF Quick Start tests and some practical guidance. Those of you who joined us 2 weeks ago got the great presentation by our colleague Daniel, who talked about all kinds of good and best practices when it comes to ATF. So I wanted to show you a couple of those things in a real instance today. And then, of course, talk about all the good quick start tests that we have. Today's presentation is less of a PowerPoint thing. We'll have a little more hands-on experience today. And I have prepared my developer instance for that. So any of you who don't have one yet can get a personal developer instance on developer.servicenow.com and do just the things that I have been preparing for this one. I am super glad you're here. Please make use of the Q&A panel if you have any questions about ATF that you want answered. And with that, I think we're going to head into it. As I said, not many slides. We'll always have this one in here. Don't make any purchasing decisions based on anything we may say in this session, but this is just a formality for today. So what about those quick start tests? Our teams have invested quite some time and some effort into creating as many quick start tests as possible for their out-of-the-box processes. So I will show you on how to get started. This is just an intro. I will show those things in the instance as well. The most important part about this is there's a documentation page that I will also link. So I will post this presentation in the community post for this session as well. We have a docs page that lists all of the quick start tests that are currently in our system and the plugins which you need to activate to get to them. You can activate them from the plugins list, search for ATF tests, and you will find all of them. You can just install the required package, and then the most important step is you will have to create a copy of that test, and then you can adjust that for your configuration. The out-of-the-box quick start tests are read-only, and you cannot run them just the way they are. The most important part is you will probably have to adjust them to your implementation anyways. There's also a great video on YouTube that I've linked there, and I encourage you to go there and check that out as well. To give you an overview on where we have invested, you will find that most of the out-of-the-box quick start tests that we have, and that is 433 by Rome.
I had no idea that it was that many. Like, that's actually shocking to me, Lisa. That's more than, if you'd asked me like how many we have, I'd have probably said something like 250.
Yes, 250
shocked.
Is not even all of IT workflows. So most of them, in that case, it's 433 for IT workflows, 140 for customer workflows, another 43 in employee workflows, and some other ones like CMDB and stuff. While we're at it, I am going to launch a small poll that you can answer while we're talking about this. Just 2 questions, like what have you done since our last session? And then also some, did this, the best practices actually help you? So we'll let this run while we talk through these. When we look at the different quick start tests that are out there, you will find that there aren't any for creator workflows like App Engine and Flow Designer and that stuff. And that is, I mean, by design, because creator workflows allows you to create your own applications, and we cannot possibly fathom what kind of applications you create. So we cannot really provide quick start tests for those. So that is the main reason why there aren't many for platform or creator workflows. So, but it has been a great effort, and I really appreciate that we have that many quick start tests. However, I have already seen some of the objections posted by some people that, well, not all of them are heeding the best practices that we're giving out just now. And that is true, but that is also because a lot of those quick start tests have been created in releases Madrid and before. So a lot of that guidance or great new features like the create a user function haven't been around when they were created. So one of the jobs that we're currently working on is to working with our teams, with the other platform and business units to make sure that the quick start tests also adhere to those best practices that we give out. So that is mostly a heads up. So don't be confused if you find tests that don't go with that.
And that jives with pretty much all of the development that you see on the platform from ServiceNow, right?
Yes.
So, business rules that were written in 2008 and not updated since then are going to follow the best practices of 2008 at that time. And so unless they had a reason to go and modify that business rule, it's not been updated to the latest, best practices that are available because it's there, it's working, and you don't review your whole code base all the time for all best practices because you would spend all your time just updating your code base to best practices and not actually developing new features.
And also remember, never change a running system. So if you touch it, it may go broke. But that's all. Actually, I don't want to skip ahead about this. So this slide is mostly taken from docs, but I thought it was worthwhile to mention these recommendations. So whenever you copy a test from those quick start tests, but also like when you copy your own tests, there's a field that will be populated that is called copied from. And in the instance of the quick start tests, that will actually help you when you upgrade your instance and those tests get updated by our engineers. In that case, you will get the option to revert your copy to the base system so that all of the changes that you made will be reverted. That is similar in how you go about with differences after an upgrade in the upgrade VTV, upgrade center VTV. So the same goes for the quick start tests. It's a great way to go back to out of the box if there have been baseline tests if you want to get the newest version and then add your customization again. So that is a really handy option that is around for those quick start tests. I wanted to show you that, but I actually didn't have an instance that I changed or that I upgraded since I changed anything to quick start tests. So I must trust the documentation in this case.
Fair enough.
All right. So that is already all of the presentation. Yay! We're short on presentations today, which is a good thing sometimes. All right, let me close this.
Short on slide.
Very short on slides. All right, let's go and get my browser. There we are. All right, so this is the page that I promised you. I hope everybody can see that. And maybe before we jump in, let's end the poll and speak about the result just a bit. All right, so that is awesome. 8 out of 10 have already worked with ATF since our last session. That is a great number. I am super happy that's the case. And one more who didn't get around to it, but wants to. So that is really awesome. And it looks like the majority of people, 10 out of 10 that answered are very happy and they think that the best practices actually helped. So that is very awesome. I can share this with you too. So Andrew can see it as well. So this is a really good feedback for our last session. And I hope these things will help you going forward as well. Right. Check the chat. The chat is good. You good, Andrew?
Yep.
Awesome.
I just had a little sneeze.
Yeah, that's okay. Bless you. All right. So the docs page that I promised you, I will make this bigger. It will also give you all of the categories, all of the products that we have quick start tests for. And there are many. And you can already see which release they have been added to our instances. So we have a bunch of things for agile development. There is more, there's so much more. There's financial management, there is incident management. Some of those are actually installed by default. So not all of them need to be activated on your instance. I found that I think the most important ones for incident, problem, and change, some of those are already active on a PDI anyways. There are more for service mapping, service level management, which is quite interesting. So I would recommend creating ATF tests for your service level agreements as well. It's always good to know whether they work or not. We have anything across skills management or project portfolio management. So there's a quick start test for almost anything. And if there isn't, there's always the idea portal on the community. So you can go ahead and suggest more quick start tests for those things. All right. I have my instance and I want to make sure that I'm not locked out, but it looks good. So I did what I told you off before. I went to the plugin list and I filtered for ATF tests. And all of the tests that we just saw on the docs page can be activated from here. And all of them are marked with -ATF tests. So you can go ahead and activate them from here.
It's a nice thing to search on then.
Yes. So that is very handy. And of course I clicked on it and now the whole page is loading again. So Gina was asking, yes, some are automatically enabled and others have a plugin. That is correct. So let's try this one again. Quick start test. Quick start suites. Still loading the plugins. There we are. So my developer, my PDI instance is mostly vanilla. I didn't change too much. So these are some of the tests that and test suites that are already installed. As you can see, we have some for survey management. We have service level management, problem, incident, change. So most of the standard ITSM stuff. And what you can also see here already is one of the things we talked about last week, and that is naming conventions. So all of those quick start suites have proper naming. So they start with a shortcut or an abbreviation for the module that it stands for. For example, the incident management test suite starts with incident MGMT, and then all of the test suites that are included in this one also have incident MGMT below. So it is really easy to group them. And it's actually also done this way from this in this test suite. So let me just switch to the correct scope right here, incident ATF test.
Yeah, that's a great thing to highlight there is that the filter for this test suite is that naming convention. So it really reinforces, please use this naming convention because otherwise your test suite won't be included in the master test suite.
Exactly. That is really a really good feature. So whenever you're creating your own test suites, and I will show how to do that later, you can just walk with or use this naming convention to get them into the test suite. And they get auto added if you create a new one that follows the same convention. Okay, so this is my test suite, and it tells me I cannot run this because it is inactive. And of course, one more thing before we head in there, what I already activated in my instance are the test and test suite properties. So I activated this and this checkbox. Otherwise, we couldn't run any tests at all. This is the first step you always have to do. Then we'll go back to the incident management test suite. We want to run this, but we can't. So in order to do this, we hit the copy test button. What it will tell me, of course, is that this test suite consists of one or more read-only tests, and that sometimes demo data is required for copy tests to pass. Again, This is not how we recommend you write your tests. If you can, try to write self-contained tests. And I will also have an example.
I've got a question before you hit a button, Lisa. Do you intend to copy this into the same scope? Or are you making a new scope to copy this into? Or are you putting it into global?
That is an excellent question. I actually have hit that button before, so I already have the copy in this scope. But if I wanted to do this by myself, I would probably create a new scope for my application.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. All right, so let me check out the copy that I already created. I hit the button before because I needed to test.
I want to test this out. So Ashley thinks it won't copy outside the scope it's in.
Ooh.
I'm not sure that that's not what my expectation will be. So I want to try it. Can you drop into,
I will just drop into global and find out.
Sure.
Okay, I will try this and then maybe use the change management ones. There's no button.
No button because we're not in that scope. So there must be a condition on the button. I wonder if it works anyway, though. That's for another time.
Yes.
Thanks for taking that little detour with me, Lisa.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Ashley, for pointing that out. I would have expected I can do this because I can do this in all kinds of areas. For example, in Flow Designer, if I am in a new scope, I can copy the flow and thereby have a copy of that flow in a new scope. So that would be handy too.
That was my expectation as well, because it's the experience I have other places. So yeah.
All right, so Gina also says that may be a recent change. We'll have to find that out. Okay, so I have my giant quick start test incident management, and there are so many tests in here, or test suites that group up more tests. And one of the things I wanted to show you are the differences between UI steps and then for following tests, creating your test data at runtime with server steps. So out of this whole list of tests, I have one that is called something with self-service. That is here, incident creation self-service copy. And if I would run this test, it would open the record producer with UI steps, of course. So it will open a record producer and click a button and submit it, and then open the record and then go from there and execute it. But in following tests, when it's not about the creation of this incident that I want to do things with, I may just skip those UI steps and thereby shorten my test. In this case, we have a server step. So this one says record insert, and record insert to insert into the incident table and the affected CIs. So this will save a lot of test time to not do those steps in the UI, but to use server steps for that. If that makes sense.
Compartmentalizes it as well. So it runs faster. It's simpler to set up, and it compartmentalizes the thing that you're testing.
Correct. Also, another thing that you can do here is if you have a test with those first like 4 or 5 steps, before you go on, you can create copies of that and use those for later other tests that base on the same data, so that you don't have to like recreate those steps all the time. That's what I usually do. I will just copy those server steps and then test the other use cases that may follow after. All right, let me check my notes. I have shown this. I want to also show. All right, I've done this, I've done this. So in your case, maybe your configuration is different, and maybe the copy button that you want to use, the copy incident button, does something in a different way, or maybe when you want to walk through the incident flow, in this case, and your implementation is different, this is where you would go ahead and start and create customizations. Maybe throw out some of the steps, replace the steps, or maybe you don't want to work with specific users because you don't have the demo data anymore. You could go in here and make sure that you have existing users for the caller that are in your database or your demo data, and not the one that not the demo data that we provide. Or you can also go ahead and use lookup data and use that. And to show that, I want to go back to my tests. And I have created 2 more tests that start with LH, because those are my initials. And what I wanted to show here is I have a client-side test. And the most important part I wanted to show here is, aside from this being client side, is that we've had some questions last time about, can we test in workspace? And we cannot yet test in configurable workspaces, but we're working hard on that. So that is going to be in the product in the future. But what I wanted to show here is that it's absolutely possible currently to test at least forms and lists and UI actions in agent workspace. So what you will do then is, first, as always, create and impersonate a user. I have created one with the role of ITIL. Then I open a new form for the agent workspace. And just before I go in there, one more thing I wanted to point out about the create a user thing. We have heard your feedback. I know that this has been a request in the idea portal for a while. We now have the option to fill additional fields in that user that we're creating at runtime, because maybe email is a mandatory field on your SysUser user table, and then you couldn't use this step before this was added. But now you can. Now you can add any of the fields that are on the SysUser user table and fill them to make sure this works. And then you can add roles or groups and then impersonate this user. I think this is super handy, and that allows pretty much everybody to use this over the impersonate.
That's a great enhancement.
It is. We've had so many customers ask for that, so it's great that it's finally in there. All right. So for form UIs, I can actually just choose Agent Workspace right here and make sure to open a new form. In this case, I want to create a new interaction. And then in my next test step, I will say, okay, let's open this for my user Joe employee, type as chat, and he just called to say hello. After that, for client, for a client test, I need to actually click the button too. So I have to choose the right UI action and then confirm that the data has actually been created. So I will open this record that was created in step 4 by clicking the button. And then the last step is I will validate that those fields have been added, have been set. So far, so good. Now, when I run this, I will open a client test runner, and we have already all heard about the headless runner, but because it is hard to set up right now, and I haven't done it yet. I haven't done this for this instance, and B, it doesn't show as nicely because you wouldn't see what is happening right here. That's why I just picked the regular client test runner. And there we go. It opens the agent workspace, sets some fields. Then just to be sure, opens the record again. I guess we could just go with the reloaded page, but we never know exactly whether after submitting through the save button, it would land in the same page or not. So just to be safe, I added the step to open that record again. And we can see that this test succeeded, and it took a total of 35 seconds. Which doesn't sound too bad, but it's still quite long, right?
Yeah, 35 seconds adds up, as as you test more and more and more things.
Right. In contrast, I have created the same things with server steps. So I create and impersonate a user, insert a record. It is already saved. I don't have to click a button. And then I validate the same record. I don't have to open the record to validate it. So we only have 3 steps for the same thing that was 6 steps before. And if I run this, we don't need the client test runner. And it runs and it's done. So that was 2 seconds.
It runs and it's done.
So you can imagine.
I think the rendering of the UI took
Yes.
longer than the actual test there.
Yeah.
Like updating those progress workers in the UI probably took longer in
Yeah.
the transaction than the actual running of the test.
I am pretty sure it does, because I have done this before earlier today or earlier yesterday to test it out, and it took 1 second. So I think that's a pretty compelling argument for using server steps as much as possible. So as you can see, my runs in the past days that I tested this were between 23 and 54 seconds. So 54 seconds over 2 seconds is I think the most compelling argument when it comes to server steps. Okay. Can we use custom UI steps for agent workspace page? I haven't tested, but I don't think so. Let's test. Let's test this. So open a new form. Let's put this after open a new form. And then maybe just assert some text. Or component. Let's go with component state validation. Let's see if we actually see any components. So before we do this, we have to retrieve the components and see whether it finds anything. It'll open it. And I think we're going to test, look for the state of test, state of state, which should be new. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay. This page has no testable components, so I'm afraid the answer is no. So all we can do in Agent Workspace is go for regular list and form test steps, and you can use them. You can check whether there's a value, whether there are, you can set the values, you can validate them, you can do lists, check out the lists, but it's not possible to go for custom components here. It will be possible in the future with configurable workspaces, because that's the idea. Okay, so we've gone through the execution time. I want to show you a little bit about self-contained tests. I've mentioned before that
I love self-contained tests.
Yes, you want to make sure that your tests are can run regardless of data that is already in the instance. One of them is what we're already doing. So we're creating the interaction or the incident that we're going to test on. But maybe we should also dynamically look for an employee, because maybe Joe employee has left the company. So let's just do this. We will add a step before we're opening the form. So add a new step, and then I will go for server record query after create a user, and I will look up the sys user table and then check whether I have one that is very important, active, because we don't want people that aren't in the company anymore. And then let's go check for first name is Joe. But in this case, we'll take any Joe. It doesn't matter. Maybe we have any Joe
will do.
It can be any of the Joes. It doesn't have to be Joe employee. Maybe we have other Joes in our company. And now how to do this is I will replace this fixed entry here and say, let's go for record query. And my option that I have here is first record. It'll just pick the first record that comes up. And if you want to give it any more info and what it looks like, then you'll have to put the filter that way. So let's go to field values validation, because if we change the input, we must also change the checking. And again, record query.
That does seem reasonable.
First record.
Change the input, change what you're checking.
Yeah. And for some reason, it throws me back to the server side, but I want to go back to the client side test because I want you to see what is happening. Okay. We're opening the interaction and it is Joe employee again. That's so awesome. Okay, that was maybe not the best example. Maybe we take another name. And it's easy to do once this one's done. Let's go for an Andrew. Maybe.
So Mark asks a question, can we search for a user with a certain role? And the answer is sure. So the record query step can get you a record from the M2M table that stores that, the relationship between roles and users. What I'm not sure of is I think you'd have to feed that into a separate query step in order to use that user.
Yes.
Because the data pill picker won't let you walk down into that. So it'll return you to the M2M entry. And what you actually want is the user entry. So you'll have to pass that into another query step.
Yes. I mean, we can do this if you want to. Let's test this out. So we'll do a record query. Today is so interactive. I love it. We'll go for sys user role, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just the roles.
User
has roles?
Has role. I believe it is. Has role.
Has role. There we go. And then we want to make sure that the role is maybe ITIL. This will give me a result set of users. Oh, I haven't put it to position 2, but I want it in position 2. And this will also tie into one of the questions we had 2 weeks ago is how do I reorder them? Because we cannot drag and drop them the way we're used to, but what we can do is execution order, set this to 2, refresh the list, and it will automatically, magically renumber the rest, which is awesome. Okay, we now have a sysuser has role version, and now we want to make sure that the sysid of the user that we found is the first record from my first record query, document ID. Right?
Nice.
Do we now need the active button? This may lead to not having a result because we should.
I would have added, if you want to do that, I would add that into the previous steps query. So I would remove it from this one and add it to the first one.
Yeah, just to make sure we don't run into a trap, because we can now go for the related fields and make sure that the user is active.
Yep.
Yes.
Nice, because we don't want to return a result that we're going to then discard, and then our test step won't work because
that would
we don't have a user anymore, and our test fails when we didn't want it to. We only want tests to fail when they actually should fail.
That would not have been good. Okay. As you can see, it takes a while now because some server steps are happening. So right now, oh, we have an error. 3 failed or threw an error. Let's find out. That is fun. Okay.
No records
So-
match query. Oh, you passed in the SysID into, yeah, you can't pass the, that's the SysID of the M2M.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it won't find anything there. Yes.
We need to get the actual SysID of the user record that's buried in the M2M.
I don't think we can get to it
How could we
because
get
this
to
one will
that?
give me just first record. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd have to script that.
Probably.
I think that has to be scripted.
Yes. Okay. Let's.
Well, then it's only one step if you want to script it.
It is. That is correct. Then let's just throw out the other one and say active is true and first name is Andrew. It's good that we tested this out. Now we know the answer. Let's remove this one. And then we can test this one more time. Will we get an Andrew? There's an Andrew. It's Andrew Jackson. So now you know this is how you get to self-contained data. This works for almost anything. So imagine you want to create an incident with affected CIs. You look up some CIs beforehand, or you have a user that you set as the caller. Look up CIs that are assigned to that user and make those the affected CIs to make sure that maybe a rule in your form works that says, hey, add the CI that belongs to the user to this affected CI field. And that way you can check all of those good things. So this one was successful, which is awesome. All right. One more thing.
And
yes.
it really removes the need to, in the cases where it's useful, you can actually do this. It removes the need to create a bunch of data that you don't necessarily need. So you can use active users or active CMDB items or an incident record to test problem. You can go just grab an incident and relate it to that problem versus going and creating an incident record right then. And obviously in different instances you might have different incidences in those instances. Wow.
Wow.
I don't think I messed that up, but I could have phrased that better. So the compartmentalization is really useful. It makes your tests flexible and resilient to things like instances getting cloned, or data getting archived, or just data changing in a way that you didn't expect.
People
really
just
helps with
deleting
that.
things.
Yeah, people just deleting things.
Yeah, this is useful for all kinds of things. You can also query knowledge articles to attach to your incident, or whatever your custom use cases give you. So you can just make sure that you create or query the data at runtime, and then your tests won't fail due to some random deleting. All right, one more thing. So what I already talked about earlier is what I would do if I had to test 10 different things about interactions is I would create this server side test steps, have the rough outline of those steps, and then just copy the test and copy the test and copy it again to then build all my other use cases upon this. So go with the server steps to set up the data, and then do your use cases on this. For example, I have created a copy, and I now want to create incident from interaction. That is my new use case. And it's not the best naming, but at least I have the LH in the beginning. Now I can add a test step that is opening up this existing record in the workspace again. Workspace, I choose my record. That is the record insert. And then I click the button for create incident. Click UI action. And there's one create incident somewhere. Search. Create incident. And I want to assert that the form was submitted. And because I am very suspicious, I want to make sure that that record also exists and was created. So I will have to say incident. And then I pick the record that was created from the UI action. Now I can run test. First part will be server steps. And now it's doing the UI steps.
That felt a little bit like a template that you were making there.
Yes.
So how would you decide between doing the process that you just went through and instead creating a template? Like, where's that line for you there?
I did a wrong thing. Yeah.
Well, let's fix the wrong thing before we answer my question and not get you distracted.
Yeah, it didn't want to open the incident with that SysID, but let's go for the failed screenshot. Yeah, that's not helpful, the screenshot.
I can't see it, but I believe you.
Yeah, it's not helpful. We should have fixed those. Failed to open the incident. I don't even know what it tried to do because I didn't watch. Let's skip ahead because I didn't test this. I will have to find this out. But
Okay.
The idea is that you have a server step test and then copy and go from there. How would I differentiate for test templates? Well, I just found that out yesterday because test templates don't actually work the way I expected them to do.
Oh, good.
So, yes, that is a good thing to learn. I thought I could take a test and create a template from the test that just takes those steps, but it doesn't. Test templates are just the skeleton of a test. So for example, the one that is default is impersonate, open a new form, set a field. And it doesn't actually
and you still have to go and pick the details in there.
Yes.
For each one.
Yes. You only pick the steps and in which order they should be added to your test. But it's not actually. But
not what those steps do.
Exactly.
Like you're not populating create a record or insert record step. What that step is doing. Instead, you're saying go through these steps in this order, but you still have to populate the content inside of them and then add any future steps that you want. So it helps make some consistency of how the tests are outlined, but not what you were trying to do, which is, actually, copy the configuration of those test steps as a starter and accelerator.
Correct. That is exactly what happens here. So in my test template, I have the choice from all of the test step configurations that are out there. But I don't actually have the config of the steps. So if I say I want to click a button, let's go click UI action. Let's just go with that. This would be a new template for using the create a user. So in contrast to the impersonate and go from there, this is what this would look like. So if I create another one and call this LH from template, and save this and add the test template, I can choose it and it will add those steps, but I will actually have to pick the fields. So for example, I will have to pick the table that it is supposed to be using for opening a new form. And then I will have to fill out the things. It gives me a description of what it expects, but I will still have to add this info. So in my case, that is Agent Jane that I wanted to add here. And I will still have to add the role and these things.
And so potentially you could have used a template to start and then configured that and then use that as the thing that you're copying.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for diving into that for us, Lisa.
It makes, I don't know. I think it makes templates still useful, but I would probably go with copying my already created tests a lot, just to make sure they're like I have all those things set already, and that all of my use cases are 100% the same, or the starts for the use cases anyways.
Okay.
All right. Let me check. I have already alluded to naming standards. I've showed you the hierarchy in the quick start tests. I will show you something more in the quick start tests. So for example, my quick start tests test suite has a bunch of child test suites already added to it. That is all of the copies that sometimes, so out of the box, there already seem to be editable copies for some of the quick start tests. So you don't actually have to copy all of them. And then you can drill in, because those are called my something something, my incident management. So they include all of the incident management ones, copied ones, and then you can drill in there and find all the test steps. So there's this hierarchy that we already also recommend, is to make sure that we're going per product probably, and then maybe have suites that deal with specific parts of the product. So for example, you could group them by capability, or maybe by stories. If you're doing test-driven development, you can group them by stories, and then epics and themes, or whatever really fits for your use case. And to do this, I want to create a new suite that is called my LH suite, because I'm like that. So let's call those description. Is it name? Description? I think description. Starts with LH. And then when I save this, it should auto add my suites. It's not description, is it? It's name. Okay.
Name.
Save. There we are.
Yay!
All of them. And now I
love a little victory.
And now I can also determine which ones I want to run first. So I can say this one goes first. I give it a number, and then I say this one goes next. And then this one. We created 4 tests. Fun thing about those tests and the test suites. So if we have more than one test suite grouped in other test suites, it will start to paralyze. Paralyze? No. Andrew, help me.
That's not an easy word to say. And now that I said that, I'm probably going to screw it up too.
They will run in parallel.
Nope. They will run in parallel. That's what we're going to say.
And to make sure that two different tests that are not running in parallel, you can go ahead and say, I want to exclude this one to run in parallel with the one from the template. So the ATF will actually add tests here automatically if they look at the same data or the same tables. So for example, if a bunch of tests are testing the same, I say incident, or maybe the same CIs or something, they would be added here automatically. So you don't have to worry that they run in parallel. But in that case, I want to run my suite and it should run some of the things at the same time. So for example, the server steps could run automatically while the other things run. And that saves on a lot of time as well. We'll find out if things happen. We can't see it actually. It should run. We cannot see because we have the client side thing open, but some things could run in parallel. So that was, I think, all that I wanted to show today. Unless we have more questions or more things I should show.
I don't think we do.
Awesome. Is everybody still there? People are still there. That is great. Okay. So we will let this run and go on. And before we head into our goodbyes and the next, an outlook into the next sessions, I will run our Academy feedback poll. You already may know that. It's just a few questions.
We like getting feedback.
Yes, all the feedback. We want your feedback. We want to know if you like this one that was a little less structured, if you're interested in more ATF topics, if you intend to come back. So as a little outlook for the next sessions, we have another session again in 2 weeks' time, and in 4 weeks' time, my colleagues Andrew Barnes and Daniel will take over those because I am on PTO for one of those. I think our planned topics for the next ones will be system clones and some instance scan, intro and best practices and all of this good stuff. So I hope that will be interesting to you too.
Yep, and I think the one 2 weeks from now will be instance clone. I will definitely get that posted here soon. It'll be at the same scheduled time, but the instance cloning I think will be the one next up, and I'll be hosting that session. Yay. And I hope to see you there and invite your friends who have cloning questions. Come prepared to talk about cloning.
Yes, questions. That's the most important part of this session is give us your questions. We will answer whatever we can. And if we can't do this live, we will follow up and give you the answers after, because this is the main purpose of this webinar format. I will post this session on the YouTube again, so be sure to be on the lookout and share with your friends if you think this is relevant to one of your colleagues or your acquaintances or anyhow interesting. Make sure to share out the link as well. And I really hope you learned something and this was interesting to you. So it looks very good from the feedback. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody.